Okay, so welcome to today's webinar. Thank you everyone for coming along to our webinar on kickstarting your succession planning. My name is Peter Forbes. I'm Managing Director of Navigo and I'll be your host for this webinar today. So today's topic is around kickstarting the succession planning efforts, and what we want to take you through today is a process that you can follow and also show you some of the tools that are available to assist in your planning efforts. We are recording this webinar and we'll post it onto our blog in case you want to see anything again. So stay tuned for a follow-up email. Just a couple of housekeeping type instructions. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. But if you do have any questions you want to ask, you can use the little raise hand button in your control panel. And there'll be a section at the end for questions as well. Just a little bit about Navigo and who we are. The Navigo Group is a niche solution provider of enterprise HR tools, and we've been doing that since 2007. We have over 600 customers throughout Australia and New Zealand, and we're based here in sunny Melbourne. We go to market as a couple of brands. Today we're talking to you about our Navigo Workforce Intelligence tools, which includes workforce visualization, workforce modeling and succession planning type of tools. We also have an employee onboarding solution called HR Onboard, and one of our brands is a information and research site for HR technology professionals called Navigo Research, and they're all on different websites if you're interested in those. Today, if my buttons work, there they go. Today, we'll be showing you some screenshots of our succession planning tool, which is called Planning at Work, which is a tool that enables you to visualize your workforce, model that workforce, and of course, it assists in the succession planning process as well. We have a number of products in our Workforce Intelligence brand, including Visio, which is a workforce analytics and workforce planning tool, and a desktop tool for organizational charting called Org+, which has been around for quite a while. So today, your presenters, some of your background on your presenters. My name is Peter Forbes, Managing Director of Navigo. I've been in the HR space, HR technology space for about 20 years now, and I've played a lot of different roles in there. Usually, I kind of started in HR as the conduit between HR and IT, being the only technical person in HR, and it was a role I really loved to play because it enabled me to really help HR with the tools and the information management to get some of the operational and process jobs done within HR. These days, I run the Navigo group of companies that I just spoke about, and I'm also a dad to 4 young children who I like to spend a lot of time with, and it keeps me young. In my spare time, I also blog on our Navigo research site about HR tech issues, including architectural options, operational HR, and strategy, and the general industry news and information in general. Also joining me today is our product manager, Belinda Welsh. Welcome, Belinda.
Thanks, Pete.
Belinda has been in the enterprise software space for about 10 years now, and she's been with Navigo for 5 of those years. Currently, Belinda's role is a product manager with Navigo, which basically means she's the expert on all of the products that we bring to market around our different brands. But Belinda also has played a role as a HR process consultant, going out to organisations, medium to large corporates within Australia, helping them use some of the tools that we take to market. And in her travels in those roles, she's gone through the succession planning process with a number of organisations. And today, that's the experience she's bringing to this webinar. Belinda is recently married, and in her spare time, she's in the process of a complete house renovation, which has been going for a long time, hasn't it, Belinda?
Yes, a very long time.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so look, just wanted a little bit of an introduction about succession planning in 2014. Succession planning obviously is a hot topic, and it has been for a long time. It's a hot topic, but not commonly practiced, I would say, in my experience, in a lot of HR or organisations. It's a hot topic at the moment, possibly driven by what some people call the silver tsunami, which is as the boomers are leaving the workforce, it's creating a lot of holes, obviously, in some of those top leadership positions, and it's becoming more critical to know who will fill those roles. And it's just not large companies who need to worry about succession planning. In the research for this webinar, I found a few articles about small to medium businesses who are also having to deal with this, as a lot of those owner-type owners who are in those senior positions are considering exiting those businesses. And is there anything in place for that? Another misnomer about succession planning is that it's for the top executives or C-suite only. And I think it's really important for a lot of large organisations that they start creating succession plans for those other critical roles in the business, just not the executive roles. A couple of reasons why we think you should be doing succession planning. One is identifying the skills required for those top roles and understanding if we have the right people in our organisation who can fill those roles. And Belinda's got a couple of good examples she might talk about later on in the webinar. The other one is agility, and I think it's really important now in any type of business, the ability to react and move quickly as the environment changes around you in terms of the business environment. If a succession plan event occurs, someone leaves, there's a death or an illness in some of your key positions, do you have that agility to quickly move and have someone step into that role who at least will be able to have a good grounding in what to do and keep moving quickly and have that continuity? The other one is talent development, and that's grooming people for career development. I'm really interested in how organisations make the succession planning process transparent to the rest of the organisation, and I think it's really important that if you've got some real key players in your organisation, that it's quite clear for them that they understand the type of skills, qualifications, attributes that HR and the exec team are looking for when they're looking at potential successors for critical roles. So, having that transparency around this is what you need to do if you're in finance to become the CFO would be really important. And certainly the research we've seen that we do ourselves in our Navigo research, and also other survey results show that succession planning is poorly practiced, and also that a lot of organisations don't have any formal tool to assist in that process. So what we want to do now is run a quick couple of polls just to see from the audience who is actually currently doing succession planning. So I'll launch that poll now, and hopefully, if people just want to say, are you currently doing succession planning? And if you are, who's it for? Is it for the top execs only? Is it for the top execs in management? Whether you're not doing any succession planning at all, or whether you're not sure. So I'll just wait a couple of more seconds to get everyone to vote in there. So we've got most people have entered an option there. So I might just a couple more seconds. You always have to wait a couple more last little stragglers. Okay, I'll close the poll on that and share the results. Is it showing it? Look at that. So here we go. Half the audience are doing for top execs and management, which is a pretty good result. I'm pretty, or 56% are actually doing succession planning. Wow,
that's great.
Which is good. But another 31% or, well, you know, it's nearly half and half of who's doing succession planning and who's not at all.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Look, the other poll I wanted to run is for those who are doing succession planning, how are they doing the succession planning? So I might just launch that poll. So for those who are doing succession planning, what tools are you using to perform that? Is it a paper-based post-it notes, which is really... Have we seen someone do post-it notes? I'm sure we've seen someone do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, or on the wall, and it was pretty impressive. Whether you have a dedicated tool or whether you use the default Office tools of choice, which is the Microsoft suite, which you got to think Excel's been an awesome tool for businesses in the last 30 years.
Definitely.
So just leave that. I might show the results there because we've got half the audience voting on that, and I'll share those results. So yeah, overwhelmingly, it's Microsoft Office tools. 22% use a tool, and 22% paper-based. No post-it notes. Excellent. Okay, that's great. That just shows us a bit of a take on what the audience are doing. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll hand you over to Belinda, who'll take you through some of the process and the nuts and bolts of your succession planning process.
Great. Thank you, Pete. So I'm very excited to be here today to talk about succession planning. This is actually the first webinar I've done on this topic, so it is great to give you some ideas and feedback on the experience that I've had with different organisations. So as Pete mentioned, succession planning is one of those things that a lot of people aren't doing yet or have only just started to do at a certain level. And a few years ago when I started introducing this topic to customers and working with customers on it, overwhelmingly most organisations weren't doing anything, and they knew they had to but just hadn't started doing anything yet. And those that had, as the survey is showing, Microsoft products are definitely the key winner on what's being used. I've seen a lot of Excel spreadsheets used to manage succession plans. One organisation I went to had a huge pile of paper they gave me showing me their succession planning, where they had quite a lot of information on their different candidates, but all very paper-based manual templates they used to create for all their different succession plans. And that process that they went through was very, very manual to create all these different pieces of information. They had the 9 boxes and they had the different pieces of information, but they created them all manually in Word, and as I'm sure you're all aware, that can be a bit of a slow process. So what I'm going to take you through today is a process that I've done work for a number of our customers in Australia who have started to do their succession plans, just to sort of share those ideas with you. So basically what you've got on screen, the first step being preparing for planning. So basically what information do you need to collect and plan before you can start doing your succession planning? The second point is running workshops with business partners. So I'm going to run through these in a bit more detail, but basically getting the business partners involved in a workshop and actually working with them to create the succession plan. How you can identify successors in your data and find out the outliers of people that you may not have automatically considered for particular roles. Then running what-if scenarios, so you can actually see the impact on if someone does leave the organisation. If the CEO gets hit by a bus, obviously not what you want, but if that does happen, what's the impact on the business? And finally, how you can manage and share your plans throughout the organisation and how you communicate that information. So we might move on now to preparing for planning. Great. Okay, so firstly, what information do we need to collect? Before we can start doing these succession plans, what information do we need? So the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the scope? Who do we need to collect this data for? Now, as a lot of you said, you started to do your succession plans for the leadership team and the management, which is great to see. But if you're doing plans at that sort of level, you're going to need more information than just those employees. You're going to need information for probably the whole organisation. Now, while you're not going to be creating plans for all those roles, there are people in other positions that may be suitable successors for those roles. So obviously, the more people you include in the scope, the more work it's going to be to create that data. But if you've got your data in a good format, that would be my recommendation. having said that, I have seen organisations do a lot smaller scope with that data, so it does depend on how easily you can obtain that data. The next point I have is organisational hierarchy. Might seem like a bit of a strange one, but I really feel having your data seeing the hierarchy of who reports to who is actually really important when you're doing your succession planning, because often, and not always, but the people that are going to be successors for a role may be someone that they're currently reporting to that manager. And that they've been basically working with them, they're doing parts of that role anyway, and they know that business unit well.
And is it important to have that functional hierarchy worked out? Because really what you're trying to do in a business is say, well, here are the key roles, who's going to be taking those roles? So you're planning against
Definitely,
roles.
yeah. So I think it's one of the ways people help work out who a successor is, and there are multiple ways you can identify who successors are, but having that hierarchy there, and it's a very visual type of thing for a lot of organisations, to know who reports to who will help identify who successors may be for that role. Moving on to the next point is performance information. So obviously you want to have people in those successors that are performing well and have a lot of potential to take on certain positions. So knowing what sort of performance rating they have, potential ratings as well, other performance information, what their strengths and weaknesses might be as well, is all valuable information to help you make informed business decisions. Without that, you are just making decisions on personalities and gut feelings on people as opposed to how they're actually doing. And finally, training and qualification information. This is something that may or may not be easy for you to get from your current systems, as well as performance information that can also be challenging to get. But knowing what sort of training that candidates have currently done, what training they're going to do anytime soon, what qualifications they currently have, can all be really valuable information to help, again, making those key decisions. And maybe not whether they're going to be a successor, but how ready they are to be a successor and what steps you need to take in order to make them a successor for that role. So this is all very valuable information. Now, what I have found with a lot of organisations is, while this is all nice, they have some information in their HR system. They may have a talent management system managing their performance data. I tend to find a lot of people have that in spreadsheets or in various other locations. Training and qualification information, the same. They might have a learning management system, or again, spreadsheets might be storing that information, or they might not have it at all. So ideally, you want to have that information somewhere that you can obtain, and you basically just need to collect that data together. And what form you do that is up to you. But obviously, importing that into some sort of succession planning tool is an ideal way to be able to visualize all that data to help make those decisions when you're working through your succession plans. So that's the first step. The next step is the succession planning workshops. Now, again, from what I found from a lot of organisations, the HR advisor would come up with standard information about candidates in a particular role they're creating a succession plan for. They'd take that to the business partners. The business partners would probably scribble all over it, have a quick chat to them, and then give it back to the HR advisor to clean up. And it goes through this iterative process of continually updating these succession plans. And by the time they've got it done, they probably start going through the process again with the latest set of data, or the latest organisational hierarchy, because things have changed and everything's moved since then. Obviously, it's a very time-consuming process, and I suppose the other hard part is for the business owners. They are very busy people. Succession planning is not their priority. They're good at working on their different areas, and it's the HR staff that really probably care more about getting these succession plans done than anyone else. So I find that it works really well getting everyone in the room and working on it together. So my suggested approach with the succession planning workshops is getting the HR advisor and the business partners together in one room. Basically projecting up onto a big screen the current succession plans and working through it together. The benefit of this is that there is no rework after the workshop. If you're actually making the changes on the fly and you can do it really quickly, the plans are done, they're set, and the HR advisor can move on to the next business unit that they have to work with or the next group, and it's all done to the business partner. They can just move on with what they do best.
You're getting more buy-in from the business because they're there with you, but they're actually in the real data.
Correct.
The plans are getting produced.
Exactly. Also, hopefully you have all the information in front of you to make those good business decisions during this workshop. So what I'm going to take you through now is just giving a bit of a quick look at viewing your organisation and having a look at that data. So we've basically got planning at work up here, and as you can see, we're just having a look at the organisational chart. It's going to change the number of levels that we're looking at, and we can navigate around through the chart and through the hierarchy just to see who reports to who, and to help basically sort of identify where in the organisation different successors may be working through. We're also just going to change our view here to change it to a different talent management view. And as you can see on this chart, we're viewing performance and potential data. So this way we get a really good visual while we're looking at the hierarchy of who is performing well and who isn't to help make those key decisions when you're creating your succession plans. Okay, so that's basically visualising the organisation. We're going to have a look now at identifying our successors. So now that we have the organisational hierarchy, we're going to start basically looking at a succession plan. So if we turn our succession plans on, this is in a view-only mode. We can see Craig Dunn's got a succession plan in his box there. And moving through the hierarchy, this plan doesn't actually have any other succession plans set up at this point in time. We can just have a look at the different levels to see all the different plans within that area. And again, this area hasn't got any plans set up yet, so someone's got to get busy creating succession plans. But we can go into edit mode. And with the edit mode, this is where we can start creating those plans and identifying the successors. So for Gail Dunn here, I'm changing the status of our plan and also the effective date. So this is in draft mode at the moment. And we can start identifying successors. So with Bridget, I've moved her into the box.
Sorry, I'll pause.
Yeah, pause that for a second. Thank you. So Bridget, looking at the hierarchy, as you can see, Bridget's reporting to Gail Dunn. Her performance potential in her box is very high. She's been a great successor for the role. She's been working in the finance team for a while, so we just know Bridget's a great successor for that role. So having said that, I've dragged her into that succession plan, as you can see. And because she's been working in that team, she has all the training and everything she needs for that role. I've changed her status to ready now, which is why she's now highlighted in green. So you can see she's got a little green icon next to her, basically identifying that Bridget is ready to go as a successor for Gail Dunn's role. Now if we keep going, so that's one way to identify a successor. The next way is by looking at some data points. So I'm going to get the list up and we're going to do a search for just the finance team, just to see who else is in that team. And we can see here we've got a list on the side. Now, I know some of these people, so I'm going to just give them a tick. And as you can see on the right-hand side where we've got the 9-box grid come up, they're all popping up in that grid in different boxes, basically showing me, based on their data, how well they're performing and how high their potential is to help make good decisions on who I would also like to have as a successor for that role. I just changed that view so we can view their names. You can see we've got Bridget in that role, but in that box, but also Greg as a high achiever and high performance. So I'm going to drag him into Gail Dunn's succession plan as well, or in the finance manager's succession plan, I should say. Looking at his role in the profile, he's an analyst, so he probably has a little bit of training he needs to do before he could really be a great successor. So we're going to change his readiness to ready later, knowing that we've got a bit of training and upskilling we need to do there for him. Finally, we can get even smarter with identifying our successors, and I'm creating a smart filter now where I'm going to set up some criteria to identify the types of people I would want to take on the finance manager's role. So first of all, I'm going to look for someone with high performance. So I'm going to set that their performance has to be equal to or greater than 8. So the performance ratings are a 1 to 10 ratings, just in case you weren't sure. And then they have a high performance, but also a high potential. So I'm setting up now that their potential rating has to be greater than or equal to 8 as well. Okay, and finally, I want people that are in the finance team because they're the ones that are going to understand finance the most for this position. So I'm just going to find where the department is equal to finance as well.
And this is a great way of of finding candidates. If you've got a big finance team, the people doing these plans may not know everyone in the team. So you're using quantitative data to actually find people, little pockets of talent that you might not otherwise find.
Exactly, yep. It's a great way to do it based on different pieces of data. So it wouldn't have to be department. You could do it based on if they've completed a particular qualification or training course or something like that. So you can see in this list here, we've got a few candidates that we didn't see before. I'm just adding them into the 9 box so you can see them there. But Priya is another candidate that I didn't previously find. So I've added her from the 9 box into the succession plan. And looking at her role, she is a senior analyst. So she'd probably be ready soon. A little bit more training required than probably Greg, but she'd be a good applicant for that role as well. Now, in the succession plan itself, the order that the successors are in are important because they're ranked on who should take that role first. So we're just going to change the order around and put Bridget at the top and then Priya second and Greg last, depending on how ready they are to take on those roles. So you can see there that was 3 different ways we could identify successors through our data. And as I mentioned, every organisation can do it a different way. One organisation I worked at even told me that they have plans in place or they have successors for roles because, you know, they're the son or the son-in-law of the owner of the organisation, and so they're a shoo-in for a role even though they may not have, you know, the qualifications or the performance and potential to back that. So there can be a number of different factors as to who is actually going to be, have it.
This is where I think it's important for people in your organisation to be to understand how successors are chosen for roles, and how transparent is that criteria. There's a bit of a debate going on in HR circles about using data versus, you know, what they call the geeks versus the hippos, where geeks use data and analytics to make decisions, where hippos stands for the highest paid person's opinion, and, you know, choosing them that way. And I think, you know, it's a mixture of both. You always need to use that qualitative sort of or subjective type opinion, but you need to back it up with some data as well. Definitely. Use the best of both worlds. Okay,
so we're going to move on now to running what-if scenarios. So basically, this is really a handy way to basically see what happens if the CEO leaves. If the CEO leaves the organisation, what does the organisation look like? Obviously, some positions are going to have their successors go in place, and how many roles does that impact? And then at the bottom level, what's left? What positions do you need to hire for? And are they also key roles that if someone leaves that position, are you going to be in trouble? So I might just get you to
I'm back up.
Go back. Okay, so basically we're going to now go and show the succession in action. Currently we've got Matthew Sullivan in the CEO position, but if something happens to Matthew, he gets hit by a bus or something horrible happens, what does the organisation look like?
There's a scandal. It's usually
scandal, yeah. All right, so let's see that. Okay, so now you can see that Craig Dunn has taken that position as CEO. He was previously the Chief Financial Officer, and as you can see now, Gail Dunn, probably his wife, has taken that role, so she was the #1 successor for that position. Now going back down to Gail Dunn's role, which was a finance manager we created a plan for before, now Bridget, who was the best successor for that role, has taken that position, and now as you can see, Priya has actually moved up to #1 there. Now if we go down and have a look where Bridget was accounts payable manager, and now there's no one currently in that role. So this is where it comes down to how far down do you go, because given that the impact at the top of the chart can have a huge impact on the whole organisation. So just getting that planning in place, but this is a really handy way to see if something happens or you know someone's going to retire soon in the next 5 years, what impact does that have on the organisation? You can see the impact on that, which is good to see. Okay, and finally, you've got all your plans worked out. How are you going to share them and manage them with that organisation? So there's a few different ways this can be done. Very commonly, people like to have some sort of document, like the PDF you can see on the screen at the moment, that you give or hand out throughout the organisation showing the plan for particular positions. So we're just going to see that now in planning at work. So if we basically go into the print and share area, which we'll get to, we'll be able to see the different export options. And with planning at work, there's a couple, but we're going to go to PDF. And with the PDF, you've got a few options on what you want to see. So we're going to change some of the data that we're going to see in this plan. I'm going to add photos in because everyone loves photos in their different plans. It helps make it a bit more of a visual. We're also going to add in the tenure of the different incumbents as well. It's useful to know how long they've been in an organisation for because it can help make decisions as well. Now this is a good place for you to add additional information if you have it in your data, things like what the strengths and weaknesses of candidates may be, what qualifications they have, what training they've done, etc., to help give a bigger picture. But we're just going to keep the data pretty light on for the purposes of today. Okay, so if we have a look at the pages, I've added in a custom footer there for confidential, so if anyone gets their hands on this document, they know that they shouldn't be sharing it with everybody. And you can see here, this is a PDF that's generated where you've got Matthew Sullivan as the current incumbent, and he's the CEO of that role. And his performance potential rating. You can have whatever information you like displayed there. And then the successors we've got them in order of what they're ranked. You can see where in the 9-box grid they currently are, their performance and potential rating, and also how long they've been at the organisation. So these plans are automatically created for each role or position in the organisation you create a succession plan for. So you've got that paper version that you can send out if you need to. So that's one way. Also, you can actually share it within the tool itself. Now, as I mentioned before, a lot of the business partners probably aren't that interested in using your tools. They're probably more interested in you working with them or just doing it for them, realistically. But just so you're aware, in the security section of planning at work is somewhere place that you can decide which succession plans different roles can see, basically. So it is quite common that if you're a business partner of a particular area, for example, an operations area, you should only ever see the succession plans of people within your team and not within anyone else. So here you can see you can actually choose the range of people that can see that plan. And then the final tab here, you can decide if they can see plans at all. If they can they view them only, or are they actually able to edit and create succession plans too? The 9-box grid, you can also choose whether they have access to that feature or not. So it's just a way you can share it actually within the tool instead of having to send around PDFs if that's your preferred method. So they're good ways to share the plans around.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks, Belinda, for showing us and giving us some of your experience of what you've seen works and how to get the best result in that succession planning process. I guess just to wrap up this webinar in terms of the key takeaways that I guess we've covered today and what you can take away is I think planning the process is really important. You know, understanding who needs to be involved, who are the candidates, how transparent is that process about how you go to pick successors is really important. Some of the I was at a HR technology conference last week in Sydney, the HR Tech Fest, and one of the keynote speakers was saying that process always trumps the tool, because there's a kind of saying in the sort of the tech space, does the software lead the process, or does the process lead the software? You know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And one thing he really said, Jason Averbook, who's a HR commentator from the US, mentioned that you know, you can have a A+ process and a C grade tool, and the result is a pretty good result, an A or a B+, A- or B+. But if you have a C grade process and an A+ tool, you're always going to get a C result in terms of the output. So having that process really mapped out and organized is critical. The other thing which we see in all of the HR life cycle is information management, data management, understanding where your sources of truth are, how good the quality of that information is. And we've seen with succession planning, combining the position-to-position type information, your functional hierarchy, combining that with then, performance and training information of your people is critical. And as Belinda covered, that's a real struggle for a lot of organisations because they're in disparate systems. But it's really important to try and have some discipline about that information management practices, which is probably a whole other webinar topic. But, you want to make sure that you're not missing any pockets of talent in your organisation. You forgot to give that great example about that.
I did, yes. So just butting in there, Pete was talking before about how some organisations are trying to find who the successors could be, and we found a few examples out there with customers that they found not only did they not in their organisation have enough successors for a particular position, but basically Australia-wide there wasn't enough successors. So an example of this would be one organisation we worked with, they basically design different bras, and they basically have talented people that have gone through university, done a particular course in order to take on those roles. And there weren't enough candidates or people in Australia doing that university degree in order to fill the demand that they had. And there's probably a couple of examples of these key positions. So these aren't positions that are leadership positions or management positions. They're just
critical roles.
Critical roles, exactly, within the organisation. And so it's important if you've got those sort of positions that you identify them quickly, because they've had to start up their own programs that encourage people to actually do these courses in order to have the workforce that they need to make the company grow.
And that kind of then evolves out into workforce planning, which is looking at the demands in your workforce and how you fill those demands.
Exactly, yep.
And look, the other point is using a dedicated succession planning tool. We've shown you examples from our tool, which is Planning at Work, to show how you can visualize your information, how you can create plans, run scenarios, and what if this type of thing happens, and distribute those easy and securely. Having a dedicated succession planning tool helps you speed up the process and manage the data that you have to make that easier. It also avoids a lot of the heavy lifting if you're using, if you're using Excel and Word and PowerPoint. Obviously, having a tool where that single source of truth is for your plans, it makes it easier to find again, that you're not scrambling in 6 months' time when you're reviewing these plans to then go back and find all these disparate pieces of data. And finally, the communication and maintenance of these plans, being able to share the plans to the different people in a format that they can easily digest and consume. So whether that is as a visual, whether it's as a presentation, export to PDF or a PowerPoint template, or even just exporting it to Excel that you can merge into other products. Critically, though, is as time moves on, plans need to be maintained. And I think, Belinda, we were talking earlier about you usually see this as a 6-month cycle in most organisations.
Yeah, I did find that those that were doing session planning, 6 months was a very common cycle for them to do them again. Having said that,
review them at least.
Yeah. Having said that, a lot of organisations, the turnover can be quite a significant change that happens in that 6-month period. And so I think some people are starting to find that might not be often enough.
Yep.
It does depend on your organisation.
The maintenance of the plans is huge and this is why a tool is good, because as in real time your organisation changes and the people in those roles changes, the succession plans cater for those changes dynamically. So you're not doing that manually. So there are key takeaways. So that's about it for our webinar today. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. We've got now some time if anyone has any questions. And we do have a question here. We've got a couple of questions. So we've got a question, is Planning at Work a layer on top of the Org Plus product? And we probably should explain. Planning at Work is like the next generation of what a lot of the market knows as Org Plus. So Planning at Work is a cloud-based tool that you access over a web browser. It has all the functionality around org charting and workforce modelling that Org Plus does, but it adds a couple of extra dimensions in terms of modelling and succession planning, and it does it in a much more seamless way, using the latest generation of software tools to deliver that, and obviously as a cloud-based product. We've got another question here that I'll just have to read. So companies with low turnover, in your experience, how do these companies manage the staff that are ready now, but there isn't a job available and doesn't look likely in the short term?
Yeah, I'd say my experience with that has probably been, it's a bit of a struggle for the organisation because that happens.
To keep those key people.
Keep those key people, yeah. Because there's especially probably the energetic staff, the talented staff that want to keep moving and don't want to stay too stagnant in a position, probably struggle a bit if there's nowhere to go. And it is a tricky one because you can't just make a position available for someone because they're ready for it. Yeah.
So that raises another question. If you're a successor for a plan, do you necessarily know that? Do organisations communicate that, hey, you're in line for this role, CFO role?
From what I found, no.
Really?
Yeah. So not that I particularly think that's the best thing, but a lot of organisations I found keep that very confidential, and they don't want people to know what the succession plan for their role or even for them is. Which I think kind of goes backwards a bit on the whole talent management and career path and where you want to go and what you need to do to get there. It seems to be a little bit...
So there is what I always think of the reverse of succession planning, which is career path planning for an individual. And there is tools, again, last week at the HR Tech Fest, we were exhibiting that. There's a couple of new tools coming onto the market that allow individuals to map out their career path. So a couple of tools that do this at an organisation level, tools like Fuel 50, another tool called Plan Do, which keeps the ownership of your career development with the individual and not the organisation, and the individual chooses if they're going to share that with the organisation. But that is career path planning for people. So while they might be low turnover and there's not necessarily a path in that organisation, you can still work with individuals to create a path for them, which I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably something that I haven't seen a lot of that would be fantastic for people to do, is bring together their succession planning and career path planning to make sure that the company and the individual are on the same path and heading the same way, and they're not heading in different directions.
But yeah, that's probably a nice little research point around succession planning, particularly and as opposed to how Australian, New Zealand businesses do it compared to, you know, the very US-centric type research there. That's about all we've got time for. Look, we are recording this webinar, so if there's anything you missed, we'll have that recording of the webinar up on the Navigo blog, which is blog.navigo.com.au. Thank you once again for everyone attending. There's some information on how to contact us. If you want any more information, please feel free to reach out to us. Thanks a lot and have a good day.